Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Mindbody Medicine for Chronic Pain. I am here with a guest of honor, Christina Sarno Horner. Hi, Christina.
Hi, Sean. How are you?
Thrilled to be talking to you.
Thank you for having me.
Oh my God, 1,000%, 1,000%. I mean, I feel like you're someone in this world who needs no introduction, but just in case people don't know you, why don't you introduce yourself and tell us what you do professionally, and then we'll go from there.
Sure. My name is Christina Sarno Horner. I'm a licensed mental health counselor. I have a small practice here in Brooklyn where I work with clients and I supervise practitioners. Much of my work is in the healing of chronic pain and other chronic conditions. And my father, John Sarno, was a pioneer in the field of mind-body medicine. And so I'm following in his footsteps and making up some of my own, following my own path as well. And that's what I do.
Awesome. Okay, I want to get back to the following your own path as well. But before we get to that, I want to start by asking, like, what was it like? I wrote this question down. What was it like growing up with Dr. Sarno, like a father who was like an absolute hero to so many people, and then also dismissed as a complete quack by so many others? Like, and it's clear from the work you do that you believe in the way that he saw the mind-body connection. Yeah. And I'm just like, what was that like to have his ideas met with such like extreme mixed reviews?
I mean, it's sort of a mixed answer, right? Partially, I don't know when I was a kid if I was proud particularly of my father because I was a child and he was my father and whatever, right?
Right.
But I was very aware of the fact that he was extremely important in a lot of people's lives and that he had helped a lot of people. And so, I mean, I guess I was proud. I think I knew he was important, that as a healer. I knew that he was a physician and that he was like very serious as a doctor. Um and so I think I did always feel like my dad cared really deeply about his patients and would talk about it. Like we knew if he was frustrated or worried about somebody's recovery or working something out, you knew that. And then, and I can speak more to my own experience of the mind body connection, but I think, and I've said this before on other platforms, like it's important to know that I never had a different model. So I didn't grow up ever believing that chronic symptoms, probably many more than are on most people's lists, were anything but psychological in origin, right? And so that's not to say that they were not experienced physiologically, right? Like that they were very much, your body was doing real body things, and
Right.
but I always, I was raised to know that if I had something chronic or something that crops up or something that's confusing, that the likelihood was much higher that it was related to something that was happening in my nervous system and in my brain.
So different than most of us, obviously, as you know.
I mean, yeah, and it's interesting, right? Because sometimes I've gotten pretty good at it, but I used to find it really hard to describe because I took it for granted. Like I didn't know that you didn't know,
Right.
right? It's like, how do you, so yeah, so super different. I think the part that was made it very clear that my father faced a lot of criticism, particularly from his peers, was that he was very upset a lot about it. And so it was really extremely painful for him to not be validated by most of the doctors that he knew, many of the doctors in the building that he worked. They wouldn't sit with him at lunch and stuff. Like, it was literally like high school
God.
kind of dynamics. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
And, and meanwhile, he was enormously successful, and which I think they also didn't like, honestly.
Yeah,
Uh,
I believe that. I believe that. And what a wild juxtaposition, to have so many people feel like you saved my life. Patients who just like felt like they owed him so much. And
yeah,
then to have his peers right, in these high school dynamics like you can't
totally
sit with
dismiss
us.
him. Yeah, you can't sit with us at lunch, literally. Like, they'd walk past his table, and my father would come home, and he'd be furious, like, so and so and so and so didn't, like, walk past me. We used to have lunch all the time, and now they won't eat with me because they think I'm crazy.
Wow.
Right? And I I mean, part of it is that it continues to go against what people are taught in medical school.
Mhm.
Um, and, um, and I think he took business away from the surgeons,
Yeah.
so they didn't like
Yeah.
that.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, but it was painful. I mean, I think there was a part of me that resented a lot of it. I certainly resented the fact that my dad was upset a lot because he couldn't get any traction with his peers, and he couldn't get any traction in the medical field. Like, nobody would listen to him. Um, and then, the flip of it was he was having these unbelievable successes literally every single day, 50% of which were just from people reading his books. Like, people didn't even come in to see him. They would just be getting better. And the more popular the books became and the more people got better, obviously the more that happened. And so as a kid, he started to be, have some like notoriety in public, which I hated. Like, we couldn't go anywhere, like, we couldn't eat out in New York, we'd go on vacation, like, wherever we'd be on the bus, the subway, whatever, people would always come up to him with, like, tears in their eyes and, "Thank you so much, and you saved my life," and, obviously, my father was lovely and totally gracious, and I was, like, 15, I was like, "Yeah, I don't care about that," like, "Get away, I'm just not interested," and
Right.
but as I got older, then I started feeling a lot of pride, when I
Well,
started being able to share him with the world a little bit better. Um, yeah,
that's hilarious because I'm sure if I saw Dr. Sarno on the street, I would probably come up to him in the same way, like, "Oh my
yeah.
god."
He saved my life, he saved my mother's life, he did
Exactly, exactly. Like,
yeah,
I've learned everything that matters from your
yeah,
theory.
yeah, and I've said this before, right? I think what you're saying is really important, which is that, like, so much more happened for people than their pain went away.
Right,
And so people's pain went away. That was the primary reason they read the book, or they went to see him, or they listened to his lectures. But also, he gave everybody permission to have the full range of feelings and to take themselves less seriously, or to be kinder to themselves, be compassionate,
right,
re-engage in the things that they love to do in life. I mean, these people are people who are feeling desperate and hopeless and
right,
broken,
right,
um, and mostly because they don't even have a history of expressing themselves,
right.
right? And he gave them permission. He authorized it.
Mhm.
He insisted that they did it, and then a lot more, I think, got better. I mean, it wasn't just their pain that went away. They
Mhm.
were able to live richer lives.
Absolutely, absolutely. But let me ask you this. Let's get into I mean, you're bringing up your mind-body connection, your experience with that. Talk to us a little bit about that, and then I wanna get into the bulk of, like, helping people who are listening, like, what do I do if I'm stuck? So we will get there,
Yeah.
but let's go here first.
You mean like how I do my work versus my dad?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Let's get into that. But
Yeah.
changes you've made, evolutions that makes,
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I would say at its core, the work I do is still very much my father's model.
Mhm.
right? It's three parts where, initially really shifting the mindset is so important, helping somebody, giving people the tools like the psychoeducational tools, reading books, journaling, thinking about their past history as in the medical world, right? And then countering it with what we now know about neuroscience. So I think one of the biggest changes is that the neuroscience wasn't there when my father was practicing. It didn't exist. We didn't have all the studies, and we didn't have everything we know now about how plastic the brain is, how stuck neural pathways can become, right? How, or I should say, well worn,
Mhm.
and so when people have a chronic condition, their brain's really on a loop that keeps sending pain signals out. And so at that first piece of the work where we're really trying to help people understand what's happening, I have neuroscience at my disposal,
Mhm.
right? I can talk about the nervous system. I can talk about the fight flight system. I mean, he talked about the nervous system as well, but there's like a lot more specifics now that I think help people really see and maybe have faith that it's a neurophysiological process. It's a whole body process. It's not one or the other. It's literally the connection between the two. And even having to separate them linguistically is problematic, right? Like, it's one body. We know there was a history as to why the brain and the body were separated in medicine. Do you know it?
Not I do you wanna tell us?
I can
It's
tell
like
you.
a philosopher's name who I don't remember. Descartes?
I don't remember which philosopher it is because it's a whole bunch of them, but, the the I think the biggest reason was because of God,
Mhm.
because
Mm.
scientists and physicians couldn't operate on the body if it was God's, like, provenance, right? So you know, if if that was blasphemous in some way or somehow a sin to cut into the human body,
Mhm.
then it was important to separate the mind
Mm.
and the sort of soul from the body
Mm.
in order to allow science to prosper,
Wow. I
right?
had never heard that before, and it
In
just
order to allow medicine. Yeah, and so
wow.
it and then it became historically how medicine was practiced, right? And it was like, "Well, don't worry about it. It's not the body. It's not the mind. Don't worry about it. We're not messing with, the kind of glory of God's work,
Right,
which
right,
is, our capacity to reason and have faith, and we're just doing the mechanics.
right,
So it's fine."
right.
Right.
And it's
And
funny because I hear in there part of the problem, the idea, like,
yeah,
the mind, the body is an animal. The body is not you. The mind is you, right?
yeah, yeah. It's problematic,
Right,
totally.
right.
It's like, um, yeah, I mean, it's really separating one part of a system from the other part of the system.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah,
And the
yeah.
mind is like a more abstract notion of the brain,
Mm,
right? But they get rolled up together,
sure. Yeah, yeah, sure.
right?
Right,
You
right.
know?
Right, and is
Anyway,
it yeah, yeah, yeah. No, but okay, yeah. So, other things that that you've evolved or that you do a little differently than your dad would.
yeah. So, well, I'm also a therapist, so I'm not a
Right,
physician, right? So I don't examine people. I don't make a diagnosis in the way that my father would have made a diagnosis, which would be like to rule out other medical conditions that. And I do recommend often that first of all, if people haven't had like a full workup, they should. They should see a physician and have a full workup. And if they can, see a TMS physician, right? Who can really say, like, yeah, that's what this is. Like, as crazy as this may sound, that's what we're working with, because that can really help the process for somebody who's feeling skeptical, right? Or having a hard time wrapping their head around it because they've already seen, 50 doctors who have told them the opposite,
right,
have told them it's structural, it's muscular, it's because your pillow is too
right,
soft or too hard or too mushy or too whatever,
right.
or your backpack, you're carrying it on the wrong shoulder, or I don't know, like any
Exactly.
list of.
On all the foods, stop eating these foods, stop eating
Oh,
those
no,
foods.
no,
That was
don't
a
eat this,
I
that.
went down that rabbit hole so deep,
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Christina,
yeah,
as
yeah,
a
and if
20
you're
something.
definitely intolerant of this, but
Right,
because you are, you should be eating more of that, and,
right,
um, and there's don't use this skin cream, use the other cream
right,
because this one's gonna give you a rash, and,
right.
there's no shortage of things they've been told by doctors, so to then to step in and say, "Okay, forget everything everybody's already told you.
Mhm,
Let's talk about your feelings. Let's talk about your quality of life. Let's talk about the complicated relationships you have." It's such a drastic shift that sometimes for some patients, it's important to go see a TMS physician and have a doctor who sounds like a doctor and looks like a doctor,
right,
you know,
right, right.
tell
Well,
them what's happening.
1,000%. Yeah, 1,000%. Let me go back to what you were saying before about the way you do this work. There's 3
Yeah.
parts. Just
Oh, I only said
give us a rundown of the 3 parts.
yeah. So it's and maybe there's 4, but there's
Great.
mostly
Let's
3.
do all the parts.
Like mindset, shifting
Mhm.
mindset happens
Yep,
through psychoeducation,
yep,
right? It's part of shifting mindset is also beginning to think about yourself as a psychological being versus a physical being only, right?
yep.
And then it's spending time looking for or giving some space to the feelings that are unacceptable, the ones that we don't like to have.
Mhm,
So the ones that we've been told we shouldn't have, like rage and shame and terror and the things that live under the surface and tend to be irrational, right? And we're pretty rational beings. And so we don't think that they're permissible, or we have lots of reasons why we don't believe that they're okay.
mhm,
And so I do a lot of that work as well. Um, and so I think that's pretty much the third place, right? So it's really
mhm,
mindset, which we do through psychoeducation, right? Thinking of yourself psychologically, which can happen in a bunch of different ways. And then of course, the biggest piece, and it's the reason I'm a therapist, right? Is digging deeper, finding what our um less desirable feelings are and giving space, like holding space, having compassion for them.
mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And is there a mysterious 4th part that's kind of an
No,
add-on?
I was sort of thinking it's about, I mean, Nicole Sachs and I have talked about this a lot, and we both agree it's about staying with it, right? It's not like
Mm,
because the work of building new neural pathways takes time.
mhm,
It's not a quick fix, unfortunately. We
mhm,
all we all wish it was,
mhm,
but it requires repetition, telling the same stories again and again, holding yourself with compassion in different ways every time you tell the story, you
mhm,
know, um, talking like creating a new narrative about what your pain is really about,
mhm,
why you have it,
mhm,
or whatever your symptom is,
mhm.
what your body's doing to protect you, what your body's protecting you from, right?
Right.
Really, which are these unacceptable feelings. And so the fourth part would be time
Yeah.
and, just giving it time and space, right? Really staying with the work.
I love that. I mean, I've actually never heard that spelled out so clearly as almost that it's its own separate part of the work, but it's kinda nice to think of it that way because for me, that has been so important, and I know it's been so important as I work with my clients now that I'm doing this professionally to know that, like, this takes time. It's not 'cause some people ha get a book cure, awesome. I certainly did not.
Fantastic. I certainly am not your kind of person either. And I'll say the part that is, you know, and again, it's different because my father was a physician and I'm a therapist, right? Like we'll work with one person for years, and it really is the time, the space, the repetition, right, that
Mhm,
creates change.
mhm,
And and there's no difference here. This is exactly the same thing. And I personally struggle with, like, I want when I feel anxious, when I whenever I have something unpleasant that I'm managing, right? I want it done. I want it behind me. I want it
Yep.
over.
Same.
And it just doesn't work like that.
Yeah.
And so, you know, I think also when you're doing the work with a therapist, you have the space to go so much deeper, right? To
Mm-hmm.
really like unpack the different parts of your life,
Mm-hmm.
your past, your present,
Mm-hmm.
the relationships you're in, work relationships, home, I mean, all of it, right?
Mm-hmm.
That one, that takes time,
Mm-hmm.
but two, it also tends to get at the same core conflicts from different angles. And
Mm-hmm.
so it offers your brain more opportunities to create new pathways, new narratives
Mm-hmm.
around the stuff we get stuck on.
Yes. Okay. Yeah. Let's get into that. Like, my uh, impression is that a lot of listeners to this podcast come with the like, I'm doing this work, but I'm stuck. Like, I still have my symptoms, or like my symptoms are getting a little better, but not a lot better. I
Yeah.
need help. So, I guess my question for you is like, having done this for like years, what most common themes do you see in like what people need, like what your clients need, and advice that you can offer people?
In stuck client, people who feel
Stuck.
stuck.
Exactly. Exactly.
Okay. I mean, I'm going to start by saying everybody feels stuck.
Yes.
So you're not alone, right? And if you don't feel stuck in one thing, you probably feel stuck in another thing. So, okay. And I think the piece about symptoms, right, is that if we're looking to go from headache to no headache, right?
Mhm.
We're still kind of in the medical model, right? So if I have a headache and I take a Tylenol and my headache goes away, great. The Tylenol, the acetaminophen, and I have zero ideas how it works. Like, headache, I mean, I actually don't. I find it remarkable. Like, how does your fever go away?
No,
But
right, yeah, modern medicine is miraculous. It does
oh
not
no, it's
cure chronic
totally
pain, but it is
miraculous.
miraculous.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. No, no, no. And I am like an enormous fan and want them to keep developing all
Right,
the amazing things they're
right,
developing,
right.
and very much want treatment when I need treatment, please. And
1,000%.
Tylenol and Advil are fantastic. And so like, but again, that's it's a very mechanical model,
Mhm,
right? It's like I'm going to do a thing and something's getting fixed and then I'm going to feel better, right?
mhm,
And so part of the shift is, and so part of the stuckness, I think, is telling yourself over and over again, like, okay, this is not a purely physiological process. I'm not a car engine. My therapist isn't a mechanic, or this isn't a book about mechanics. You know, uh, I have to see myself as a more kind of flexible object, right? And so the symptoms tell us so much. So if your symptoms have gone away, or if they have changed, or if they have moved, or if you got rid of one and got a new one, right? This is great data for your conscious brain because it means something is working,
yeah,
right? So it
yeah,
may not be the outcome that you want yet, but it does mean that you're doing it, right?
mhm,
It means that really well-worn paths, neurological pathways are starting to shift because the physical symptom is changing. So if it gets less, and sometimes it gets more. I mean, sometimes when people start working with me, their pain gets worse for a few months before it gets better,
mhm,
right? And it's really the system like throwing out all the stops to protect you from actually feeling the feelings,
mhm,
right? And that's
mhm,
the same thing of getting a new symptom. It's like, fine, you're not gonna pay attention to the old one. How about this one?
mhm,
Um, so that would be my first one of the first things I do is really talk about, can we start to look at the physical symptoms as um, data
mhm,
about what's happening in our brains
Mhm.
and like track it and use it as a tool, right?
Mhm.
Um, and try to get excited about the fact that you're noticing it as opposed to just being terrified of it,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. Absolutely.
Um, because also once you start making an unconscious process conscious, so the unconscious process is, you know, challenging unconscious emotions trigger the brain's flight or flight system.
Mhm.
The alarm bells go off and it sends pain signals to your lower back,
Yep.
right? That's a
Or
completely
any body part in case anyone
any body
listening
part.
doesn't get that. Any body
Literally
part.
any body
Yep.
part. It could be like a
Yep.
throbbing eyeball. It could be plantar fasciitis,
Yep.
IBS,
Yep.
lower back pain,
Yep.
you know, anyway, I mean, literally the list is like endless.
Right.
Um, and but that whole process is unconscious. It's like this
Yep.
automatic, right?
Yep.
And so one of the things that I will often do with a stuck client, and really everybody gets stuck. Like nobody doesn't. Because it's frustrating.
Mhm.
Who wants to still have their pain,
Mhm. Mhm.
right?
No, no, no. I'm
And
sure so many people listening are feeling very validated by that. I'm
it's
feeling
so
very validated by
frustrating,
that. Yes.
It's like, this sucks, like, I do the
Right.
work and I feel the same way, like, I've had a stiff neck for, like, 2 months, I know why I have it. I'm very clear on why I have it, and it
Yeah.
doesn't really matter, it's sticking around, and you know what? I just kinda have to roll with it and have faith. I have faith that it's gonna go away and that I'm going through a stressful thing, and when that thing passes, I'll do a little more work and it'll go away.
Right. 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 Right.
I don't know
Right. Right.
exactly what.
I love that, and I just want to like sit with that for a second for people listening to the podcast, like just like hearing the lightness with which you talk about it, like it'll go away. Having faith that it'll go away.
So, I'm so lucky because I'm not afraid of it,
Yes.
and that's the gift my father obviously gave me,
Yeah.
right? It does not terrify the fear that my neck stiffness, which is also sort of painful,
Hmm.
will stick around forever and is an indication of some, like, broken part of my body. I just don't have it.
Yep.
And so that's it's a privilege, like, I'm aware of that, right? And many people do, and so much of the stuckness is also kind of holding your fear differently or thinking about your fear as one of the symptoms.
Mhm. Absolutely, absolutely, and I like, it's just so nice to hear you, like, share this mindset with all of us because, like,
Yeah.
anybody can access that privilege, you know? It's not like you have to have $1,000,000 to buy it, like,
No,
if
no.
you know it, you know it, and then it's just about internalizing it in your
Yeah.
body.
And if you lose sight of it, even I lose sight of it. If something hurts enough, I might start seriously freaking out. But if you
Yeah,
lose sight of it, like, you can find your way back. It's okay. You, like, need a little calm and peace and a moment and some writing, and
yeah,
you can find your way back to it. So, okay, so that's the other thing. It's like, get a little still with it. Hold it, hold the symptoms as loosely as you can,
mm,
right?
mhm,
And start using it as an opportunity to learn more, right?
mm.
Every time you make something unconscious conscious, you start unraveling the chronic process.
Yeah,
So every
love it.
time I feel my pain and I say, "Yeah, I know what this is. Like, it definitely hurts. And I know that part of this is because 'cause I'm on my way to have lunch with my mother,
Right,
and
right.
I have a lot of feelings." You don't even have to fix the feelings. It's just like, I have a lot of feelings about
Mhm,
having lunch with my mother,
mhm.
you know?
Yeah, 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 but let me ask you this.
Mm.
A question that I've gotten in many different places now is how do I feel my feelings? And I'm always like, that's a hard one to answer. So I'm curious. So I want to wrap this up in two. First, how do I get past my defenses? And second, how do I feel my feelings? How would you go about trying to answer those questions?
How do I feel my feelings? Do you have a specific example?
No, that's why this one is hard. Becau and I think it honestly shows how, um, cut off most people are from their feelings that people are
Yeah.
asking this question. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, I mean, it makes me think of a couple things. And of
Right.
course, everybody's different. So I'm answering really generally,
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
right?
yeah. Whatever comes to your mind, I'm
Um,
sure will be helpful for all
I
of
mean,
us.
the first couple of things that come to my mind if a client would say that would be to get in touch with what kind of a person I'm working with, right? Like, are they really type A and really perfectionistic? Are they super hard on themselves? Are they selfless? Like they never take care of themselves. They always take care of other people.
Mhm,
Um, you know, I'm just going to go with those three, right?
mhm,
Um, and so some of my tools might be one to have them read stories of other people who sound similar,
mhm,
right? Because there's something about externalizing the experience that feels safe, where like having it myself doesn't.
mhm,
So if I read one of the many books that are out there, or listen to your podcast, listen to a sufferer, or listen to another podcast where I can hear somebody who has a similar story to mine,
mhm,
that's one way that you might begin to feel your feelings
mhm,
because you hear other people saying, I realize that um, I actually really resent how hard I work,
mhm,
that there's a part of me that feels deeply sad that I can't relax,
mhm,
right? Then you might begin to go, oh, well, do I feel sad? Do I feel?
mhm,
And so that'd be one way.
mhm.
The other thing that I do a lot is to think about what feelings in your family of origin or like in your childhood history were acceptable and what weren't.
That's such a good one. I think that's such
Yeah. And you usually can get to that by like what didn't happen and what
yeah,
did happen,
yeah,
right? What did people express and what didn't they express? And you can bet if they expressed only anger, they were all really sad and scared. Like it's,
yeah,
and the part of being the therapist is to sort of make that interpretation, right?
right.
It's like if somebody's angry all the time and they were scary to you, then maybe you never want to be angry because you don't want to be like them,
Yeah,
right?
yeah. No,
Or
absolutely.
the other thing that never got expressed was grief or sadness or loss or disappointment or. So certainly looking back, I do and I like not for nothing, I love the feelings wheel, man.
Yeah. No, no, that stuff is helpful. Like,
I
call it
mean, you have
elementary. No,
a
no, it's
list of
helpful.
of a list of, for somebody who's really stuck,
Mhm,
I would download the feelings wheel and go through each one and see if you can identify it in yourself ever.
mhm, mhm.
Like, what are the like, what are the variables that would make you feel there's some really, like, specific ones on the feeling
Right, right,
wheel.
but yeah, yeah, and for anyone who doesn't know, they just Google feelings wheel or wheel of emotions, something like
Yeah,
that, and, like,
yeah,
it's every word you could possibly use to describe a feeling state will
yeah.
be on that wheel.
Yeah, and it's great also because there's so many words, and of course languages are, the window to everything.
Mm,
The You may find words on the feelings wheel that you didn't realize were really applied to you, and then you look at it and you go, "Oh my god." But I mean, we're talking about people who are feeling really cut off, right?
yes.
And so, and then I think the final thing I would explore with somebody who's really cut off is to seek to understand what the risk is
Mm,
for
yeah,
having feelings. Like what's really the risk,
yep,
Um, what's gonna happen to you? Or who are people who have feelings, right? Like
mhm, mm,
if you think of somebody who has a lot of feelings, how do you what's your experience of them? Like
mhm,
do you judge them? Do
mhm,
you hate them? Do you envy them?
mhm,
You know, because I think if it's really hard to summon up something in yourself, it's often easier to see it in others and
mhm.
then reflect back.
Absolutely. No, that totally makes sense, and just something that I hear in what you're saying also is, like, the idea of, like, why do I have a TMS personality? Because maybe some of us just have these personality traits to begin with, okay,
Mhm.
but maybe they're there because of our experiences, and I think looking at,
Absolutely.
you know what I mean? Like looking at like what
Yeah.
it reminds me of what you're saying. Like what do I think about people who have feelings? Why do I keep my feelings in?
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah. And, like, I think the thing and I think my father used to say this, although I might be putting words in his mouth, but it's okay. Like, the a lot of the people who have a quote unquote TMS personality, and by the way, everybody has TMS, so, like, nobody
Good point.
doesn't have a TMS personality,
Good point.
but the more kind of, like, extreme
Right.
kind of
Right, the people who get real deep in it.
last, like the type A,
Yes. Yeah.
driven, and you could be driven in any kind of way, not necessarily to be like a billionaire, but, you could be driven to be the, best, most philanthropic or most, charitable person in the world, or best mother, which
Mhm.
is not a feat that anybody can accomplish. The but the like is that they're all really laudable. Like it's not none of it's bad,
Mm.
right? It's really
Mhm.
lovely if you want to be successful. Of course you do. It's really
Mhm.
lovely if you want to be a good mother or be
Mhm.
charitable or be kind or be good to others over yourself. The issue isn't that those things feel important. The issue is that you also have feelings about them unconsciously that are less pleasant. And letting yourself have them does not mean you are no longer a good person.
Yeah.
Right. So, like, and I know Nicole Sachs talks about this beautifully, and she and I laugh about this a lot, but like to acknowledge that I both despise my children and adore them
Mhm.
is hard,
Yeah.
you know?
Absolutely. 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 So let me ask you this. Um,
Mhm.
you said this to me one time in supervision, and I wrote this down, and I actually said this quote earlier on the podcast. So if people are like familiar with
Okay.
listening to me, they will have heard this before. You said you do not need to solve all your emotional problems. The problem you need to solve is your relationship with yourself and your relationship with your emotions. That to me, I was like, "Wow, way to, like, sum it
Oh,
up really beautifully." Um, eh eh
cool.
anything else to say on that? Anything else to elaborate on that?
Well, yeah. If I thought that I had to solve my problems to get rid of my pain, I would definitely be in deep despair because that's not fucking happening,
Right.
right? It's not about that. It's about holding yourself with compassion. It's about not beating yourself up. It's about being okay with your feelings.
Mhm,
Being okay that that you have them, that giving permission for them to have some space, giving permission to even acknowledge them,
mhm,
right?
mhm,
Repression, rep- repressing one's feelings
mhm,
is it's a self-protective act.
mhm,
I think it's kind of aggressive as well,
mm. Yeah, good
you know?
point, good point. Right,
I,
like, the aggression towards self, which
yeah,
people who are doing that, like, because I did this for a long time, you don't even know you're doing it. You don't know how mean you're being to yourself. You don't even know.
right, right, totally.
Yeah,
And to sort of think, don't feel that.
right,
That's not okay to feel,
right.
right? Shame is a big one. People feel deep shame about something they did or said or experienced that had nothing to wasn't their fault, that had nothing to do with them.
Mhm,
Um, and you know, acknowledging like, oh, I feel ashamed that my parent was abusive,
yeah,
right?
right.
Or my parent was abusive and didn't know they were abusive,
Yeah, for sure.
right?
Right.
And I feel deeply ashamed that I come from that.
Mhm. Mhm.
It's stuff that people don't let themselves feel
Yeah.
or
Yeah.
say. I mean, you can write it, you can say it, you can sing it, you can think it,
Mhm.
you can
Mhm.
paint it. Like, it doesn't really matter how it gets expressed. But once it gets expressed and you don't die,
Mhm.
then your brain is like, oh, maybe it's not that bad.
Right, like habituating to your own feelings, making your
Mhm.
feelings safe.
Yeah. Maybe it's not that bad. It doesn't feel good. I don't like it. That's not the
Right.
same thing,
Right. Absolutely.
but it's
Absolutely.
not necessarily dangerous.
Mhm. I'm really glad you bring that up because I think the difference between, like, the goal, what I'm hearing you say, correct me if I'm wrong, is like the goal is like to learn that your feelings are safe, which is very different than the goal being like to learn that like I like all my feelings and all my feelings are good feelings and they all make me happy, quote unquote.
No,
You know?
no,
Yeah.
no, thank you.
Yeah.
That's not gonna happen. Isn't that
Right.
the thing? You're not gonna be happy all the time. A lot of your feelings genuinely feel shitty, and I'm sorry,
Mhm.
and there's not a whole lot you can do but be in them,
Mhm. Mhm.
but you also have to be in them.
Yeah. Yeah.
They have to be okay to have.
Absolutely.
And you're not gonna fix them. And it's I think, look, I think for people who aren't in our field,
Mm.
there is a misconception sometimes where it's like, being depressed is not a feeling,
Good point.
right? It's a symptom
Yeah. Good point.
of a whole bunch of other things.
Mhm.
Being anxious is also a symptom
Mhm.
of a whole bunch of other things.
Mhm.
Right? Those are the symptoms. So, like, yes, I don't want you to accept lying in bed all day, feeling totally unmotivated, being unable to do anything. I
Mhm.
don't want you to accept having chronic pain, not being able to live your life to its fullest, being constantly in fear, right? No,
Mhm.
I don't want that for you, right? But I do want you to accept that I'm angry at my professor, so angry that I feel murderous rage,
Mhm.
and it's okay. I'm
Mhm.
not gonna murder anybody, I'm not gonna hurt anybody, and I'm not a bad person because of it.
Yes. Absolutely. And right, and what I'm hearing in there, which I think is important to make sure people listening to this understand, there's a like feeling sad or feeling despair. Those are feelings that must be accepted and tolerated and like like
Yeah.
we live with those.
Yeah,
Feeling
it's a real bummer.
depressed. Right. Being depressed and having depression, quote unquote, that's a
Mhm.
symptom and that can change.
Yeah. No, exactly, that can change. Exactly. And it's sort of not about, like, sometimes I'll have clients who are like, but my job is really hard. My job is really hard, and my job's not gonna stop being hard, and I'm not gonna quit my job, right? So I'm never gonna get rid of my pain because I'm always stressed out at my job.
Right.
And it's like, no, that's not I mean, maybe there's another conversation about finding a new job, but not really. It's not about being happy at your job. It's not about it's certainly about taking care of yourself, but it's much more about processing the feelings you have about your job. That's what's going to alleviate the pain.
I love
You
that.
don't have to leave the job.
Yep.
Sometimes the outcome is you should leave your job, but
Mhm.
but it's a secondary thing. That's not what you need to do necessarily to alleviate the pain.
Yeah. Yeah, I love it. Okay. I know we don't have a ton of time left, so I do want to throw this one in because the first time I ever met you was at Nicole
Mm,
Sax's Omega retreat, and
okay.
you were speaking there, and I remember you talked about long COVID, and this was before I knew that COVID was TMS, and
Well, long
right, exactly. Thank
COVID is
you.
a virus.
Right.
Total.
I
Long
actually
co
literally in a
Yeah.
podcast last time, I just made that distinction, so thank you for
Yeah,
making
yeah.
that distinction again.
COVID is a virus, is a very real virus. Long
Right,
COVID
right.
is a psychophysiological disorder.
So, talk to us a little bit about that because, that at that retreat was the first time I heard that, and you said still remember you saying you said, "Oh god," when I saw that, when I first saw long COVID, my reaction was, "Don't give them something else to be afraid of,"
I
and I was
called
like
Nicole and I was like, "Holy shit. Did you hear? Long COVID? No." And I was like, "They're gonna have something else to be afraid of." So, yes, I mean, I can definitely speak to that. I think that, like many other things, the media is and the medical community, right, are certainly responsible for giving names to things that are chronic. Long COVID with its like myriad of moving symptoms and unclear target. So many of the symptoms are also the symptoms of depression, by the way,
and just,
and
random other TMS symptoms, right? It's
just
usually just clusters
random
of
like
random TMS symptoms.
pain and
Yeah.
chronic fatigue. And I mean, and it's awful. It it is debilitating. It is totally real. This is happening to people.
Yeah.
And I think in a moment of such unbelievable fear,
Yeah.
when we all were afraid of dying of COVID,
Right.
right? To say, like, well, guess what, guys? Not only might you die from an acute virus, but you might have it forever.
Right.
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 And I, we knew in that moment, those of us in the community that work with people who have TMS, that, that it was a mind body condition. And that once the body had kicked the virus, like once you don't test positive anymore, right? The likelihood was, and it's proven now in quite a few research studies, that the lingering symptoms were psychosomatic, and they were about feeling vulnerable and feeling terrified and not feeling safe in one's body, not feeling safe in one's world.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, there's no shortage of scary feelings that came at the heels of COVID,
Right. Right.
right? And we hadn't been social, like we need to be social. We just so much was busted. No, I think the thing that stands out, I think maybe the most for me, and I think this is true for many people who have TMS, is the absolute terror and host of feelings that come of when you feel like you're not in control.
Yeah. Right.
Right.
Right. Right. Okay. So let me ask you this. If there was a like a soapbox message that you could spread to people, what would that be?
Oh, Sean, that's hard.
You've already given a couple good ones, so we could go back to
I
that.
would, I mean, today, so world, don't quote me on this forever, okay?
Right, right. Just today's message.
But for today, it would be like hold yourself and your symptoms loosely,
Mm,
right? Gently.
mm, yeah.
You know, trust that you can definitely heal. Like I know that you can,
Hmm.
right?
Hmm.
And give yourself the space to do the work you need to do
Hmm.
to get rid of your symptoms. They're going to go away. New ones will come some other time, whatever. At that point, you'll know what to do with them,
Hmm.
right? But like, just I think to really trust that you have the power
Hmm.
to actually heal yourself. It's kind of remarkable.
Hmm.
There are lots of people to help you on the way, but
Hmm.
like ultimately, the client is the person who does the work.
That's right. And just hearing the way that you are oriented towards your neck right now is helpful for me to hear, and I'm sure helpful for so many people listening to the
Yeah,
podcast to hear. That's such a nice message to leave us with.
it's gonna go away. It's really annoying me. I'm not gonna lie, but I know what's going on in my life, and
Mhm.
I am making a choice also. Like, I could sit down and do the work every single day for half an hour a day and be really dedicated, and the pain would probably go away faster.
Mhm. Mhm.
But right now, I have other things on my mind, and I'm not terrified of it, so it's okay.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, that's awesome. And I just hope people listening to this helps you like let go of the terror of it. We don't need it.
Yeah,
Like let
yeah,
it go. Let it go.
right, and there are more and more practitioners, more and more physicians, more and more therapists, PTs even, right, doing this work, and, like, it's gonna be okay. It's totally gonna be okay.
Yes, I love that.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, final thing.
Okay.
What are you off? Okay, I know you have the Sarno Sax solution. I don't
Mhm.
like. I don't know if you are you taking new individual clients now, or are those people all going to me and the other people working for you? Like what are you
I
offering?
have it's well, right now, so I have the Sarno Sax solution, which is a
Yeah,
training
yeah,
program for practitioners,
cool.
which is fantastic and really was so much fun to do,
Let me just
and I
say, there's
think
a sample session between Christina and me in it, where I'm a
yes,
real patient and
that's right,
Christina's the real therapist.
that's right. You did a session with me, it was great.
I did. I did.
And at the practice, from time to time, I have some availability. Mostly, I have a team of people, you included, who work under me, and I do all the supervision around the TMS work. So I try to be involved in those clients experience as well.
Yeah.
So there's certainly practitioners that work with me that have space in their practice. And then coming at the end of the summer, I'm going to do a seminar for clients.
Oh, I didn't realize that. Okay, wait, plug
Yeah.
it and give us a little
I'll
info on
just
that
plug
before
it.
we're
It's
done.
just going to be a psychoeducational, hour long, every other week thing that people can come to and kind of get the nuts and bolts of the work in another way. You can read, you can listen, you can think, and then this will just be another
Awesome.
way to integrate some of the learning.
When you do it, obviously tell me, and I will share it with the podcast listeners.
Okay, that'll be great. That's great because you've just made me have a deadline to make sure I finish.
Perfect. Awesome.
Great.
Okay, so you can find Christina, Sarno Sachs Solution, Sweet 14
Yep.
Therapy. Yeah,
Mhm.
Sweet 14 Psychotherapy. And
Mhm.
then this forthcoming offering.
Yep.
Well,
Okay,
thank you so much for being here,
Jen.
Christina. And for everybody listening, thank you for joining us. I'm sure you got a ton out of this, and I will talk to you next week.